Hello everyone and welcome back to another Fate video. Today we are going to be doing something that has been requested of me in the comments and in my Twitch chat. The question was posed to me as to who I want to see added to Fate as a new servant. Naturally, I have a list of servants that I want to see added, some that already exist in the Fate canon and some who do not, at least to my knowledge. So today we're getting experimental and we're going to cover these servants I want to see added to Fate. For this video, I will be picking one historical figure from each of these standard 7 classes and explaining who they are, why they would fit in that class, what their noble phantasm likely is, and finally maybe some of their skills if I can find anything useful in that regard. Again, all of these servants have the potential to be added to the game, and I don't really plan on picking anyone too terribly obscure. There also won't be any existing servants but in a different class, kind of like a Saber Regendo, so this is going to stay fairly fresh. But that's enough dawdling, let's get to it. Let's start off strong with the Saber class. I would like to see Ogier the Dane make an appearance at some point. Ogier is one of the paladins of Charlemagne, making him a prime candidate for a potential servant. His claim to fame is one that is not uncommon in myth, being a childhood prodigy, winning a duel against a Saracen, and claiming the legendary sword Corton. He was initially an enemy to Charlemagne, but joined forces with him once a more pressing threat of a powerful Saracen invasion occurred. He was originally a captive at this point, but upon seeing the French and Charlemagne begin to lose, he took the flag and sword of a fleeing banner boy and joined the fight. He is the unlikely ally formed from an enemy, but he actually shares some similarities to King Arthur as well. See, after his days of adventuring and battling had ended, he walked from the battlefields of France to Denmark and sat upon a chair in the Kronborg castle. Here he fell asleep, and his beard grew all the way down to the floor. He will rest here until the country of Denmark is to face its greatest peril, where he will arise again to defend it. This is much in the same way that Arthur is said to be destined to defend Britain should it ever be nearing a total loss. He would make a great servant as the archetypical king asleep in the mountain. A character like this would be cool to honestly see himself put himself to sleep or benefit from the sleeping debuff, kind of like using rest in Pokemon. I think a guts type skill would be useful as well, given that he is said to arise once he is needed. He would also likely have some form of charisma, being a man unafraid of war and charging in to assist even his enemies when they need him most. As for an NP, I would love to see him put himself to sleep for a turn, add target focus, and then, the weaker your allies are, apply buffs to them that scale with health similar to Anne and Mary's NP. He would make an amazing servant and satisfy my need for more old men in this game. Next up, we have the Archer class. I think we are likely to see a Hojir themed servant in the future. Hojir is a Norse deity who technically exists in FGO already as a member of the servants making up Muramasa as an alter ego. His role in Norse myth is one of tragedy. He was the blind son of Odin and the twin to Baldur. He was tricked by Loki to shoot an arrow of mistletoe at his brother, mistletoe being the only substance that could kill him. Because Hojir was the one who killed his brother, Odin decided to punish him by creating a giant that killed him. Naturally, he would be a divine spirit, so he would likely be in the position of being a pseudo-servant, and very likely a gender bend in the process because, Fate. Regardless though, I think he would have an interesting kit. Naturally, his NP would have to be his firing the mistletoe, but likely have an anti-divine gimmick attached to it. Given that he is blind, they may do something along the lines of having him ignore evade built into his kit, because for some reason blind people in media can actually see everything. Honestly, I think that making him a support would be the best route, possibly a quick archer with divine support similar to Chiron, but a bit more niche. We need more Norse representation in FGO anyway. The Lancer class has a lot of potential candidates, but the one I personally would like to see the most is Shakazulu. Shakazulu is one of the most famous figures to appear out of the southern tip of Africa. He inherited the Zulu Empire and fortified it extremely well against the more technologically advanced British. He was a cunning strategist and revolutionized the weapons that his people had been using, from a long throwing spear to a short, more versatile one. He is also the one who is credited for the use of the very pronounced heavy shields that the Zulu army used. Honestly, he would be a prime candidate for the Shielder class as well, but I think Lancer fits him just fine. After his death at the hands of his brother, his influence was so powerful that even when the Zulus were offered firearms, they turned them down because they believed that what Shaka had given them was more efficient. I like to think he would have an anti-European gimmick, given that his people often clash with the incoming forces of Europe. He would have a defense up or an invincibility skill, possibly a strategist advice Zulu skill that buffs both attack and defense, and a charisma-like skill given his ability as a ruler. Honestly, speaking of representation, there is not nearly enough for the incredibly diverse mythology and people that come out of the various regions of Africa, so seeing one of the Hall of Famers from the continent appear would be amazing. Next up, we have Assassins. If I had it my way, we would have had Olga of Kiev in the game years ago. She is one of the rulers of the Kievan Rus and a relative to the already existing fate Dobrynya. Her husband was killed by a group called the Drevlians, who were a rival tribe to that of the Kievan Rus. They tricked her husband and tortured him to death, and then believed that taking over Olga's territory would be as simple as just betting her a poor sad woman. Well, Olga was not a poor sad woman at all, more of an Elizabeth Bathory type but hardened by the Russian life. She was incredibly intelligent and saw right through the poor hatched plan of the Drevlians. She has several anecdotes attributed to her regarding how she more or less outwitted the Drevlians in the most macabre ways possible, but I will share my favorite one now. The group that had murdered her husband showed up and proposed to have the main murderer, a man named Prince Mal, marry her now that her husband was dead. She agreed to this on the condition that they arrive tomorrow being carried by her subjects in a boat. They were delighted by this idea, and on the next day were loaded up into a boat and carried to the castle, kind of like a palanquin. However, that night she had her subjects dig a huge trench, and the boat was thrown into it, and all of her husband's murderers were buried alive. It is stated that while they were being buried and shrieking, Olga leaned in and would ask if they took a liking to her hospitality. Long story short, she's super metal. I chose the assassin class because many of her stories are similar to this one, kind of like a Wu but less questionable on the design. So a funny thing with her as well is that she is a saint. So I think that the revelation skill would be fitting, but altered to her. This is because one could argue that her knowledge of the Drevlian intent could have been a divine revelation to her. I could see a skill like Messenger Pigeon Fire, which is a whole other story that is metal as hell. This could decrease defense and inflict burn and spreading fire, as well as giving her NP gain up. A stun skill would fit as well with a star bomb tied to it. Her NP would have to be the burying of the boat, so it would be an AoE with additional damage to kings, something along those lines, or maybe additional damage against assassins. I get asked the question often, who is the character I want most added to Fate that's in history, and she's my number one pick, hands down. Make it happen, Lasagna. For the writers, I want to keep up with my favorite subsection of characters in Fate, the pirates. Zheng Yisao is a badass, arguably the most successful pirate in history. She is believed to have been born a prostitute and married a successful pirate by the name of Zheng Yi. After he died in 1807, she took full control of his operation and became one of the most feared pirates in all of China. She more or less took complete control of the oceans around China and made Chinese merchants pay tribute to her in order to use her waterways. The Chinese officials were so desperate that they called upon foreigners for aid who attempted to stop her, but were completely destroyed in the process. She became so successful that she just opened up a bunch of brothels and retired to them once she got too old. She even received a full pardon for her actions by the Emperor of China. Absolutely insane. So, I like to imagine that her kit is like a 5-star version of Bart's kit. A massive star bomb and crit damage up, and a targetable star gather rate and a quick up on it as well. Her NP would either be her breaking of the royal blockade for an AoE NP, or a party-wide buff NP with reference to her negotiations. She is awesome, and again, we need more true badass old women in Chaldea, kind of like a Genkai from Yu Yu Hakusho. Casters are difficult because there are a lot of good candidates. For my money though, I would like to see Tsutoko Tenno. For the unaware, he is the final of Japan's 3 great Onryo that we do not have in Fate currently, the other 2 being Tamama no Mai and Shuten Doji. If we follow this trend, we may get a hot Tengu or headless girl rather than a mad emperor, but you know, that's life. Tsutoko was the victim of a plot devised by the previous emperor, Emperor Toba, to regain the throne. He was tricked into adopting the former emperor's son, who eventually took the throne, cutting off his lineage altogether. This all came to a head during a civil war in which Tsutoko lost and was banished. For all of this, rumors began forming that Tsutoko cursed the courts and that after his death, he arose as a terrible monster. This is because his body did not decompose after 20 days, and when they put him into a casket to cremate it, a storm blew in, so they weighed down the coffin with stones. When they returned, the stones were completely covered in fresh blood. After he was cremated, a lot of crazy things started happening around the successors of the new emperor, all at once. From sudden deaths to terrible illnesses, to storms, to plagues, to droughts. In fact, his curse is said to have been what led to the Genpei War, which is what established the shogunate in Japan for a long while. So his kit is pretty clear-cut. Anti-King, curses, being a new broken quick support would be nice, possibly giving him an anti-Japan skill would be interesting, or one that buffs Japanese servants or Oni. I could see him being very similar to Doman actually, but maybe with more focus on the support angle rather than the DPS. His NP would probably be the Great Curse of Japan, which exponentially buffs his allies while debuffing the enemies with curses and defense down. If you would like to know how powerful his curse really is, back in 2012 there was a showing of a drama that he was featured in, and at the moment when he turned from man into monster, a huge earthquake struck the Kanto region. Thank you to thefabulousyokai.com for all of this information. finally, we have our Zerker, none other than my boy Ajax, stronger than Greece. Ajax is a hero of the Trojan War and a monstrous one at that. Much like Shakazulu, he would be a better fit for the Shielder class, given that he is known for his mighty shield. But he is powerful enough to be a berserker. He is known as a kind and courageous warrior, a towering mountain of a man. His role is that of a defender. He is often shown in the Iliad to be the one defending other heroes and soldiers when they need to retreat, and sheltering others during fights. It is said that he came against Hector on multiple occasions and outwitted him every single time. There's even a story of the two fighting for so long that Zeus had to send messengers to have them stop, and the two warriors called it a temporary draw and exchanged gifts. Hector being given a purple sash by Ajax, and Ajax being given Hector's sword. There's also a story of Ajax picking up a boulder and hitting Hector with it, taking him out of a battle so bad that Apollo had to heal him. The god of medicine. It was that bad. He was an incredibly effective warrior, claiming many lives himself, but was also insanely intelligent. So, why a berserker? Well, that's because it's the class that best fits him. He rampages on the battlefield until they need him to defend, and then he does it effectively as hell. I have a soft spot for him thanks to me growing up reading the Iliad and playing Age of Mythology on our old Dell. But he has a lot more potential for being right up there with Herc. For those of you who don't know, the only man who is actually capable of killing Ajax was Ajax. He killed himself out of grief after losing the right to the armor of Achilles because Athena assisted Odysseus in the negotiations. He would naturally have an invincible, honestly, one that's like the protection from arrows would be great, some type of self-attack up that is also ignore invincible, and then a party-wide defense up that has a target focus on him. For an NP, he may benefit from the counter system that now exists with Bazit, so maybe something like that, but rather than attacking, every time he's hit, it increases the party's defense by 20% for 3 turns, and just call it the Bulwark of Greece. He has a lot of potential, and is in my top 3 of those that I want to see eventually. But that is it. Thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Let me know what you thought and who your picks are down in the comments. Subscribe to catch these as they go up. Like the videos, it really does help out the channel. Check out my Discord down below. Follow my Twitch for significantly less structured content. I also have a Twitter, but for now, keep your chin up. Peace.